Amazing nanny exposed for solving a 300 million crisis in seconds. What followed was inspiring. Sarah Thompson sat at her polished mahogany desk, the weight of the world resting on her shoulders. The clock on the wall ticked down to an inevitable deadline, and with each second, her anxiety mounted. She had poured every ounce of her being into her career as a corporate attorney, sacrificing countless family dinners and personal milestones for the sake of her firm. Now, they were facing a staggering 300 million lawsuit, and there was no reprieve in sight. The suit was rooted in negligence, her firm's negligence, and all she could think about was the precarious position it put her in. Her mind raced, body tense as she rifled through countless case files, desperately seeking a glimmer of hope amidst the chaos of her professional life. The children's laughter emanated from the adjacent playroom, a stark contrast to the grave silence of her office. She longed for the simplicity of her childhood home in New Jersey, for the warm embrace of her mother's arms, and the carefreeness of youth. But now? It felt like those simpler days were buried under layers of expectation. A deep-rooted part of her craved the familiarity of her past but feared what admitting that longing might unravel in the carefully crafted image of the successful attorney she had become. Just then, Bella, their seemingly simple nanny, breezed into the garden with a trowel in hand, avoiding the trap of monotony, embracing life outside the pristine walls. Sarah felt a fleeting pang of envy. How could someone, living on the fringes of luxury, possess such freedom? The thought of Bella reminded Sarah of her own entrapment, shackled by professional demands. At this moment, the juxtaposition between their lives nagged at her, uncertainty gnawed at the edges of her mind, casting doubt about who she had become. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As the afternoon sun dipped low, Sarah caught a glimpse of Bella kneeling in the dirt, her hands buried in the earth's embrace. A forgotten memory stirred within Sarah, a time spent helping her father on their New Jersey farm, finding solutions to problems in the same unadorned way. But that life seemed so far away now. Was she losing herself amid the ambitions of Manhattan? The thought brought a shiver down her spine. Just as her stress threatened to spiral out of control, Bella approached Sarah, more confident than usual, a stack of notes grasped tightly in her hands. Trembling, she broke the silence. I've been looking into the case, and I think I found something. It was as if time stopped. The eyes of all the senior partners in the room shifted to the unlikely woman who stood on the precipice of changing everything. For a moment, internal conflict flooded through Sarah. Could she, a decorated attorney, truly consider input from someone who had once seemed like just a background fixture in her life? A million doubts swirled in her chest, each more powerful than the last. What if Bella's findings could hold the key to saving them all? What if they couldn't trust her? The pressure swirled like a tempest, and in that split second, as tension electrified the air, the cruel reality settled on Sarah's shoulders. In front of everyone she feared judgment from, she was teetering on the edge of potential redemption or ruin. This was no longer just about a lawsuit. It was about their beliefs, class biases, and the deep-seated complexities that tore at what they all thought they knew. Would Sarah open her heart to an undeniable truth that could shatter barricades built over years? As the gears of fate began to shift, a deeper understanding emerged. A fragile alliance birthed from chance, a friendship standing precariously at the brink of judgment and acceptance. But just as Sarah began to contemplate the true cost of collaboration, shadows stirred on the periphery, whispered hazards from past mistakes. The real fight for justice was only just beginning, and the dark secrets yet to be unveiled threatened to shatter everything she thought she understood. The room pulsed with an electric silence as Sarah stared at Bella, awaiting an alarming truth or a life-changing revelation. The incredulous gazes of the senior partners felt like knives, each look slicing through the carefully constructed facade of her career. Could Bella's findings be influential enough to salvage the tarnished reputation of their firm, or would aligning with her lead to a public relations disaster? The contrast in their worlds weighed heavily on Sarah. Bella, once an afterthought in the grandeur of Manhattan corporate life, now stood poised to challenge everything Sarah had built. Thoughts spiraled in Sarah's mind. Could she let go of her need to assert superiority? Could she admit that perhaps this humble nanny possessed insight that her own legal training had overlooked? With a shaky breath, she clasped her hands together, feeling overwhelmed by the enormity of the decision ahead. "Let us hear what you've discovered." The words hung in the air, a hesitant acceptance laced with vulnerability. Bella's eyes widened, surprise flaring before settling into determination. As she unfolded her notes, the room dimmed, the reality of the lawsuit crashing back. The implications of Bella's potentially groundbreaking research danced tantalizingly close, igniting a spark of hope within Sarah. This was the moment she could relinquish control, allowing a subordinate to enlighten her. "I've noticed inconsistencies in the testimony of the primary witness," Bella began, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "The statements don't align, and here, these key timestamps fail to match the records of events." Sarah's heart raced. The level of detail and clarity in Bella's analysis was impressive. A part of her found it hard to fathom someone outside her elite training could dissect such a convoluted case. Yet, another portion of her was awakening inch by inch. She felt her perceptions of class and hierarchy begin to crack. Setting aside her skepticism, Sarah took a leap of faith. As Bella elaborated on each point, Sarah formulated an impromptu strategy, concisely organizing the findings into a presentation for the senior partners. It was a new dynamic, a shift from the rigid structure of the firm. But in this uncharted territory, something deeper was brewing within her, a reformation of self. As they gathered information and devised their defense, Sarah experienced a shift, reviving feelings of collaboration and unity she had long buried beneath years of competition and pride. For the first time in years, she began listening, truly listening, not just to Bella's words, but to the voice of her own uncertainty, her own fears about losing control. Staring at the mirror of vulnerability, the work was grueling, late nights turning into early mornings, and as their partnership flourished, Sarah began to reflect on her past. The memories of her father teaching her to read the land resurfaced, reminding her that justice was often about understanding nuances, much like farming, a blend of observation, intuition, and cooperation. Yet shadows loomed in the backdrop. Doubts flickered in Sarah's mind, igniting flashes of insecurity about her choice to trust Bella. What would the others think? Could she handle the fallout if this partnership led them astray? The clock ticked on inexorably, deadlines were approaching fast. As Bella and Sarah prepared to present their findings, Sarah grappled with a moment of honesty. Could she truly embrace collaboration? In the conference room, anticipation crackled in the air. Just as they prepared to step into the spotlight, a sudden knock echoed through the walls. Tension bound them together, but something else simmered just beneath the surface, a sinister urgency that something, or someone, would attack what they were building. As Sarah opened the door, the visage before her threatened to alter everything. The door swung open, revealing a figure Sarah had hoped never to see again: Jonathan, her former mentor and one of the senior partners of the firm. His presence, tailored suit and all, felt like a storm cloud ready to unleash its wrath. The assertive lines of his mouth contorted into a grimace that indicated disapproval. "What's this?" Jonathan's voice cut through the tension, needle-like and accusatory. "I happened to overhear something that shouldn't be discussed without proper oversight. Are you really entrusting the future of this firm to a nanny?" The sting in his words ignited the insecurities Sarah had been suppressing. All the progress she felt in the last few days threatened to crumble under the weight of Jonathan's taunts. She fought the instinct to retreat, to reassert her control and dismiss Bella. But there was empowerment in vulnerability too. Bella's eyes darted from Jonathan to Sarah, an unspoken plea shimmering within them. "Jonathan," Sarah began, her voice steadier than the feeling within. "What Bella has uncovered is uncovered." He laughed, a sharp and derisive sound. "Or fabricated? You're risking everything for an amateur's messy notes. The firm's reputation? This isn't just a factor in a case, it's our livelihoods." She felt the blood collecting in her temples, igniting the determination brewing inside her. This was more than just a case or a mentor's scorn. There was an opportunity to redefine herself, to embrace a reality beyond hierarchical elitism. She had already climbed over so many obstacles: a lawsuit, a struggling reputation, and her own arrogance. "Maybe it's time for a new perspective," Sarah retorted, her heart racing. "What if it's precisely because Bella is outside of our cornered world that she can see what we can't? Jonathan's expression hardened, skepticism radiating like a wall between them.
And if that perspective leads us to ruin? You'll be the one to answer for it. Silence enveloped the room as the reality of Jonathan's warning settled in. Could Sarah bear the weight of blame if their trust in Bella led to failure?
The prospect hovered ominously, a specter haunting the choices she had made.
We have to present these findings, she said finally, more certain of her resolve.
It's our best chance at finding the truth in this case.
Jonathan's steel-gray eyes flickered dangerously. You are treading on thin ice, Sarah. I hope you know what you're doing.
His tone turned to a low growl. But no, I won't back down easily.
As he turned to leave, a wave of adrenaline coursed through Sarah. She faced Bella, whose expression blended concern and respect.
In that fleeting moment, Sarah grasped a profound truth: the willingness to fight not only for herself but for Bella, a companion she had come to trust in unexpected ways.
The room pulsed again, this time with possibility.
As they readied their materials for presentation, Sarah found herself at an intersection, a choice between clinging to a past that confined her or leaping into the uncharted realm that collaboration promised. The sensation of the invisible shackles on her ambition loosened, and for the first time, she felt the freedom to act. But as she scheduled the presentation, her pulse quickened at the impending confrontation with the senior partners. Moments later, while awaiting their turn, the atmosphere vibrated with a strange certainty: time was running out. As the door slowly swung open again, the answer to her questions and the storm of doubts surged forward. The last thing she expected to face was someone who would leap into the battle alongside her, a spark destined to illuminate shadows she hadn't confronted before.
Sarah, I know a way to expose their lies, Bella whispered, eyes alight with a hidden secret ready to unfold.
Amid the charged atmosphere of their impending presentation, Sarah's heart thudded, not just from fear but from a burgeoning sense of purpose. Bella's whisper hung in the air, awakening a mix of dread and exhilaration within her. This wasn't just another fight, it was a defining moment in her journey. The stakes were higher than ever, and she couldn't afford to falter. As they navigated through their notes, Sarah's mind raced, sifting through the shards of information Bella had pieced together. Each discovery was a thread in a larger tapestry, and the prospect of weaving it into a compelling narrative filled her with a creative urgency she hadn't felt in years. It was an exhilarating determination. She felt alive as she reveled in this newfound collaboration.
What do you mean? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper, eager yet cautious.
Bella leaned closer, her enthusiasm infectious.
There's financial data that doesn't add up.
I traced the source back to a flagged account. If we confront them with this evidence, it could shift the entire case. Bella's eyes sparkled with conviction. That conviction resonated with Sarah. She was accustomed to wearing the armor of authority, but now she found herself disarmed, questioning her previous approach. Perhaps it was time to embrace a different strategy, one not bound by the constraints of hierarchy.
Okay, Sarah said, the tension in her chest easing slightly. Let's prepare the presentation with this insight. We'll show them we've done our homework, not just for us, but for the firm's reputation. Minutes felt like seconds as they blended their findings, Sarah directing Bella to focus on the financial discrepancies, while strategically articulating the implications.
In this short whirlwind, her confidence grew. She wasn't just Sarah the associate anymore.
She was a leader forged in the fires of self-doubt, tempered by adversity. As they awaited their turn, the pallor of anxiety was replaced by a flicker of hope.
Maybe Jonathan's accusations held no sway over them after all. Their combined strengths might just be enough to carve a new path in the firm's legacy. When the door opened, breaking the anticipatory silence, Sarah gathered her breath. The conference room was an arena, the senior partners lined up like gladiators, ready to challenge her resolve. Jonathan's presence loomed large, and with it, all the insecurities she had faced since joining the firm. However, this time, she didn't shy away from their intensity. The fear that once constrained her was replaced with a fierce resolve. She would make the choices that defined her journey. As she and Bella entered, the weight of eyes focused on them was palpable. The large mahogany table felt like an altar where she would lay her professional soul bare, but rather than cower beneath it, she stood resolute, fortified by Bella's presence.
Thank you for meeting with us, Sarah said, her voice steady, projecting confidence as she maintained eye contact with the partners. We have new findings that could significantly impact the outcome of our case.
In an instant, the atmosphere shifted. Jonathan's brows furrowed, and the corners of his mouth tightened.
Let us not waste time.
What do you have? What followed was not merely an outline of facts, it was a story, rich with intrigue, the collective narrative of underdogs confronting a legacy built on filters of deceit. Sarah conveyed the financial anomalies with clarity, each point delivered like a bolt of lightning, crackling through the room, and then, as she laid down the evidence Bella had uncovered, she sensed the tides beginning to shift, a slow undercurrent of acceptance blossoming among the partners. They were questioning their initial perceptions, their earlier skepticism eroded by confidence and fact. But then Jonathan's skeptical glare found her again, a challenge ignited.
Do you truly think you can overturn any decisions made?
He questioned, cold and cutting.
Sarah held her ground, the air thick with tension.
With this evidence, I believe we can present an alternative narrative that not only
protects the firm but also upholds our integrity.
Just then, the door burst open, a gust of unexpected energy whipping into the room. A figure trudged in, a familiar colleague with evidence of his own, hurried in visibly anxious.
Wait. There is something else you need to know, he exclaimed, portraying urgency that pulled everyone's attention. The atmosphere shifted dramatically. What could this new information potentially unravel? Sarah's instincts flared. This was not just a test of her resolve but a pivotal moment that could change everything. She stood at the brink of a revelation that might shape her future forever.
What awaited her next could lead to irreversible transformation or disastrous consequences.
Would she prove herself worthy in Jonathan's eyes with this mounting pressure, or would her confidence crumble?
The figure at the door was Marcus, breathless and sweating, as though he had sprinted from across the firm's sprawling office floors. Sarah's heart raced again, but this time it wasn't just from anticipation, it was a cocktail of fear and intrigue.
What could he possibly have that could alter the course they were navigating? Marcus, what is it?
She asked, her voice steady, even as her insides churned with uncertainty. He stepped forward, gripping a folder tightly in his hands.
I've been combing through the accounts, Sarah, there's more. You need to see this. Two pairs of eyes, Sarah's and Bella's, locked onto him. Unraveling another layer of this already complicated case could either be their salvation or doom. Sarah's mind raced, juggling the potential implications.
Would Marcus's findings support their argument, or would it complicate things further? Jonathan's expression had shifted from skepticism to a predatory focus, as if seeing a chance to exploit any weakness. Sarah felt the tension escalate palpably. This was her moment to seize control, to meld their collective strengths into a cohesive strategy.
Let us see it, Sarah said, as she stepped forward to grab the manila folder.
She opened it cautiously, her breath hitching. Her eyes scanned through the documents, revealing more discrepancies, transactions not just with the flagged account, but evidence suggesting collusion between project teams that had been hidden from view. Marcus had uncovered a potential scheme that twisted beyond her initial findings. The stakes just got dramatically higher. This is huge, she muttered, quickly raising her head. The realization that they held more pieces of the puzzle cemented her resolve like concrete. It wasn't merely about saving their reputations, it was a chance to confront a systemic issue within the firm, a chance to advocate for integrity. Sarah, Bella's voice broke through her thoughts while Jonathan's gaze flickered back and forth between them, clearly trying to dissect their reactions.
What does this mean for our presentation? The question demanded clarity and urgency. Sarah took a steadying breath.
The narrative had changed again, but this time it was within her control.
We need to recalibrate our approach. Instead of a defense, we go on the offensive. We reveal the corruption and present our evidence as the firm's ethical compass.
Jonathan interrupted, a sneer creeping up his lips.
You really believe you can challenge decisions made at the highest level with this? That's reckless.
A fire of defiance ignited within her, hotter and more potent than before.
We can't allow actions that tarnish our integrity to continue under our watch.
This isn't just about retaliation, it's about establishing a new foundation of accountability, one that aligns with the firm's core values.
Marcus nodded, emboldened by Sarah's convictions.
Bella's eyes sparkled with admiration, igniting that creative urgency she had harbored moments before, but Jonathan's presence loomed larger, frustration radiating off him. The sound of his chair scraping against the floor brought Sarah back.
You don't realize the consequences of this path you want to take.
Yet Sarah could hardly hear him now, her focus spiraled into the depths of her aspirations. This was no longer simply about surviving a challenge, it was an opportunity to thrive, to redefine her values as an attorney in this unforgiving world.
Then let us lay out our findings clearly. Right here, right now, Sarah responded, rekindling the conviction pulsating through her veins.
She turned to her colleagues, ready to draft a compelling narrative that highlighted their discoveries and positioned them for ethical reform within the firm, but as they began to strategize, the door creaked open again, revealing yet another figure this time. It was the firm's senior partner, Mr. Williams. He stepped in, eyebrows raised, a mix of concern and curiosity painting his features.
Is there something I need to be aware of?
His eyes landed on Sarah, and the weight of expectation settled on her shoulders.
This was her moment. Would she step forward into the light, brandishing the revelations of the last few minutes, or would she retreat, chased by doubt and fear?
The room thickened with anticipation, and Sarah felt the gaze of everyone on her, urging her to make a decision that could affect not just her own future but the firm's very legacy. It was a crossroad, and she stood at the helm, ready to either forge ahead or let the moment slip away.
What she decided next would determine whether she would emerge as a leader or retreat into obscurity.
In those few heartbeats, something felt imminent, a breakthrough could rise from the ashes of doubt and conflict.
Would she seize it?
The air in the room seemed to thicken, every second stretching painfully as Sarah weighed her choices. She could feel the expectation radiating from Mr. Williams, a seasoned partner who had navigated the murky waters of corporate politics with ease. But today, Sarah stood on unfamiliar ground, and the prospect of challenging his authority sent a tremor of uncertainty rippling through her. Yet, even as intimidation gnawed at her resolve, something deeper surged within her, a desire to stand for accountability, to amplify the ethical values the firm outwardly professed yet subtly undermined. The documents lay spread before her like a safety net.
Sarah was prepared to unveil what she had discovered, despite the potential fallout.
Mr. Williams, Sarah began, her voice steady but laced with urgency.
We've uncovered serious discrepancies related to our current case. I believe addressing them openly is essential.
A ripple of surprise flickered across Williams's face, replaced rapidly by meticulous composure.
Discrepancies? What kind of discrepancies? Gathering her thoughts, Sarah laid out the evidence with clarity and conviction.
She highlighted the collusion between teams that she had discovered in Marcus's findings, detailing the hidden transactions and their implications. As she spoke, she felt the adrenaline coursing through her veins, heightening every detail, driving home the growing crisis that threatened not just their project but the firm's integrity. "Sarah, you're treading dangerous waters," Jonathan interjected, his voice dripping with skepticism. "You can't expect him to take this seriously without more than just conjecture." But Sarah brushed aside his negative energy, bolstered by the determination that had ignited within her.
"This isn't conjecture.
It's a chance for our firm to be a leader in ethical practices. We need to address this head-on, not hide behind policies that could lead to our downfall."
For a moment, Williams remained silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air.
He observed her carefully, as if gauging her sincerity against the backdrop of their shared corporate history. "I admire your passion, Sarah," he finally said, nodding slightly. "But these kinds of accusations can do more harm than good if we're not prepared." Her heart raced at the unexpected validation, but also at the caution in his tone. A turning point was near, and she needed to balance urgency with tact. "I understand the risks, but it's our duty to investigate this thoroughly.
If we ignore it, the repercussions will be far more damaging. Integrity must prevail."
Williams leaned back, contemplatively, the cogs clearly turning in his frustrated, calculating mind. He assessed the sincerity in her eyes, the coiled determination that screamed for change that rattled the carefully built order of the firm.
"Let us say for a moment that I trust your intentions. What do you propose?"
He knew, implicitly, that real leadership was often about architecture, building new paths without demolishing existing structures. Sarah took a breath, clear-eyed and resolute.
"We form a task force dedicated to investigating these findings. We bring this information to the board, transparently and ethically, while ensuring that our reputation remains intact.
Or you could be setting yourself up for a fall, Jonathan shot back, clearly agitated by her escalating resolution. That's a risk I'm willing to take, Sarah shot back, finding comfort in her defiance. She felt the surge of leadership rising within her. It was seductive and terrifying, yet the gravity of the responsibility began to resonate. As the discussion unfolded, her colleagues echoed their apprehensions, but Sarah remained anchored in her decision. Despite their dissent, she began strategizing how they could present their findings, calculating the best possible narrative structure to shield the firm against possible backlash while holding themselves accountable. But just as she began to consolidate their approach, William's phone buzzed, fracturing the intensive atmosphere enveloping them. He lifted it to his ear, and the conversation shifted. Sarah felt a cold rush of uncertainty, not just at the potential upheaval they faced but at what she sensed as a pivot in her own career. Her gaze darted around the room, landing on the faces of her colleagues. They were at a crossroads too, each of them standing at the brink of change. The reality hit her squarely. No matter what happened next, they would have to step beyond their apprehensive selves to confront the tensions festering within the firm. When Williams finally ended the call, his demeanor shifted. Prepare your evidence and schedule a meeting with the board. We'll be addressing this sooner than you think. Despite the hesitation swirling around her, warmth flooded through her at the validation of her instincts. It was happening. But what lay ahead felt more formidable than the battle they were already gearing up for. It was the growing realization that confronting powerful figures would mean embracing the nuances of her own ambition, both exhilarating and terrifying. And as they prepared to dive deeper, Sarah couldn't shake the haunting thought, what if exposing this corruption not only endangered the firm's reputation but also threatened her own budding role within it? Would she face down the shadows looming before her, or would they engulf her in their depths? The room pulsated with uncertainty, and Sarah stood on the precipice of revelation, ready to push beyond the limits of her comfort. What awaited her now could rewrite everything she believed about the firm and herself. The echo of Williams's directive lingered in the air, vibrating through Sarah's core, igniting a blend of hope and trepidation. She had achieved a breakthrough, but her urgency was now tinged with the stark awareness of the gravity of the moment. In the days following that pivotal meeting, Sarah wrestled with logistics and internal expectations, torn between her commitment to ethical transparency and the looming specter of corporate backlash. As she prepared for the board meeting, the scope of her responsibilities broadened. It became clear that this was no longer merely about exposing fraud, it was also about galvanizing a culture of integrity within the firm. She reached out to Marcus, whose findings had been foundational to her case, determined to solidify their collective resolve. They met in a small conference room, posters of past achievements hanging on sterile walls, as they sorted through the data together. It's not just the facts on the paper, Sarah, Marcus noted, his brow furrowed with concentration. We need to frame this correctly. If we come off too aggressive, the board might dismiss us. Corporate politics can be vicious. That's exactly why we need a solid narrative, she replied, her fingers dancing over the keyboard as the statistics flickered on the screen. This isn't an attack, it's an opportunity for us to redefine our ethos. We have to emphasize how standing up for integrity will enhance our reputation in the long run. As they discussed the nuances of their presentation, Sarah felt a quiet power rising within her. Every question she faced from him was met with relentless clarity. She began to realize that her leadership style didn't have to mirror those who were well-versed in the playbooks of conformity. Instead, her approach could be different. It could be rooted in transparency, open dialogue, and a commitment to accountability, but with each piece of evidence they collated, doubt began to creep in as well. Was she truly ready for this? The vision of the boardroom loomed large in her mind, seasoned professionals, sharp suits, and sharpened claws. What if they ridiculed her efforts? What if her peers turned against her? Yet, each time fear clawed at her resolve, she remembered the initial thrill that surged through her when she first made her case. That exhilaration grounded her. Days turned to a restless blur as discussions swirled around her and tension seeped into every interaction. Colleagues began to express concerns. Some even approached her, their voices low and doubtful, questioning the merits of transparency in a landscape defined by calculated machinations. Sarah found herself caught in a web of skepticism, yet she deployed her newfound strengths. Rather than deterred, she became more focused. Sarah, Jonathan confronted her just days before the board meeting, his expression a mixture of condescension and concern.
You have to understand, this isn't just about right and wrong anymore. It's about the survival of our firm. You could derange everything we've worked for.
Her heart thundered, but she met his challenge head-on.
And what happens when this corruption comes to light? Are you willing to gamble the firm's integrity for fleeting stability?
His silence spoke volumes, and in that moment, she recognized her own growth, her ability to stand up to adversaries who were once intimidating. The day of the board meeting arrived, a stark contrast between their typically polished presentations and the urgency of the subject at hand.
As Sarah stepped into the conference room, her pulse raced.
She reminded herself of the purpose behind her fight, abandoning the shackles of self-doubt she had worn for too long. As she began presenting their findings, a strange calm fortuitously settled over her. Numbers and evidence flowed with conviction, but it was the passion behind her words, the unwavering belief in change that captivated her audience. But just as Sarah gathered the momentum to unveil the shocking facets of their investigation, a sudden shift stilled her words.
A scowl from one board member deepened as he
leaned forward aggressively.
You have to understand, Sarah, this is a slippery slope. Are you ready to face the consequences that come with challenging the status quo?
What I'm ready for is a future where integrity is not just an ideal, Sarah replied, her voice formidable. With that singular statement, she laid bare the stakes involved not just for the firm, but for herself. As attention surged from the room back to her, a new wave of anxious anticipation filled the air. She found herself at a crossroads more profound than she had anticipated.
Was her commitment strong enough to weather the impending storm? Would she emerge from this confrontation unscathed, or would it become the breaking point of her career?
In that moment, the stakes intensified, her ambition now tethered to the fragile fabric of corporate ethics, leaving her grappling with the realization that this journey was about to redefine her forever. What consequences lay beyond the boardroom door, and who would emerge from the shadows of doubt with their integrity intact? The boardroom's atmosphere crackled with tension as Sarah felt the weight of a collective gaze squarely fixed on her. Silence stretched, laden with unspoken fear and doubt, as the board members' words reverberated through her mind. Those in the room, seasoned executives, seemed like guards at the gates of a fragile empire. She had kicked the door open, but could she withstand the onslaught? She felt her breath quicken, a fight-or-flight instinct igniting within her. Undeterred, Sarah scanned the faces before her, searching for the courage that had fueled her journey thus far. The mission had evolved from unveiling deceit to exposing a truth that could reshape their culture, yet that truth hinged precariously on her ability to navigate the sharks circling her. In that moment, she made a conscious decision. She would dismantle her nervousness piece by piece, framing it instead as focus. Sarah glanced down at her notes, digging her heels into the ground of her commitment. Yes, the stakes were stratospheric, but she had meticulously lined the walls with data, stories, and a vision that transcended corporate black and white ethics. Let us pivot the focus back to the matter at hand, she interjected firmly, feeling a surge of resolve as her voice steadied. Transparency and accountability aren't just lofty ideals, they are the foundation upon which we can build a reputation that withstands the test of time.
Leslie, a board member with a reputation for fierce resistance, eyebrow raised, interjected, and what if this backfires? What if investors pull out? What then, Sarah? You seem to have a propensity for underestimating risk.
You're right, Leslie, Sarah acknowledged, her tone calm but assertive.
But consider this, what is the riskiest choice? Engaging in continued silence while the firm's reputation erodes, or facing the discomfort of this moment with integrity? History often rewards the bold, not the complacent. For a brief, electrifying moment, she felt the room shift.
Her confidence, a palpable force, began to penetrate the general air of skepticism. Doubt remained, festering in the corners, but suddenly there were glimmers of recognition illuminating the faces of her colleagues, hints of alignment where there had previously been none. Encouraged by the subtle shifts towards camaraderie, she elaborated further, illustrating the long-term financial benefits of integrity, her voice steady and impassioned.
Our brand isn't just our product, it's our promise to consumers and stakeholders.
If we operate under a veil of deception, we not only jeopardize our position but mortgage our future. The choice we make today will either build a fortress of trust or tear down the walls of our integrity. Muriel, a quiet yet influential board member, leaned forward thoughtfully, seemingly reflecting on Sarah's words.
You're suggesting a complete overhaul, aren't you? Governance includes risk. Yet, aligning our corporate identity with ethical integrity is risky too. How do we bridge that? Exactly, Sarah lit up at Muriel's engagement. Let us establish new protocols, communication strategies that reflect transparency at every level. This is how trust is cultivated. We show stakeholders that we value integrity over profit, and in the long term, that loyalty pays dividends. An unanticipated sense of unity began to blossom, stifling the divisive undercurrents that had dominated the room. Attuned to her rising momentum, she decided to seize it. This isn't just my promise to keep, it becomes our battle cry. We can pave the way for industry standards that honor integrity. Are we ready to take that leap? The palpable silence turned to murmurs, voices rising in discussions that seemed to spiral beyond the room. It was then Sarah recognized, the journey was crafting a narrative larger than her own fears. It bore the aspirations of every employee who believed in real change. Yet, as she savored the moment, a flicker of doubt gnawed at her again. What resistance awaited her when this meeting concluded? Would she encounter back channels of opposition, a silent undermining once she left the safety of the conference room behind? As the discussion swirled into diverse possibilities, one concrete reality dawned on her: she had already crossed an irreversible threshold. The stakes, though daunting, were now a call to action that rang louder than before. What would her next step be? And how would her newfound resolve be tested in the arena of corporate reality that shaped her fate? Sarah stepped out of the conference room, a boulder of adrenaline crashing against her chest. It took effort to ignore the deafening echoes of her own heartbeat while navigating the polished corridors that had once felt so familiar. Yet, the stakes had shifted. She had stepped into the spotlight, and the shadows lurking behind her were now all too real. The initial exhilaration of having spoken her truth began to ebb, revealing the stark uncertainty of her next maneuver. She recalled Leslie's skepticism. Her words felt like sharp talons digging in, each syllable taunting the very foundation of Sarah's courageous vision. Would the collective decision in that boardroom translate into genuine support, or merely serve as a temporary balm for the skeptics? Arriving at her office, she closed the door and sank into her chair. The room was filled with reminders of her relentless ambition. Certificates framed, inspiring quotes pinned, but today they felt like shackles rather than motivations. Instead of uplifting her, they stirred a whirlwind of self-doubt. What would true leadership require now? Was she prepared to confront the pushback that would inevitably follow? Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She needed to prepare a plan for the months ahead, a framework to translate the board's discussions into actionable items. Conflict diamonds of inspiration and fear swirled in her mind. Could she craft a strategy that maintained her integrity, without sacrificing the company's financial stability? She dug deeper into the data reports she had painstakingly compiled, statistics that spoke to the potential recovery of the organization's reputation through transparency initiatives. But as she sifted through them, a subtle tension unfolded within her. There was one crucial component missing from her plan: the voices of her colleagues. What would they really think about her vision? Would they rally behind it or resign her to be the voice of the lone crusader? This realization sent a surge of urgency coursing through her. She couldn't simply dictate a new regime from a bubble. She needed their engagement and accountability. Grabbing her phone, she initiated a series of calls, determined to connect with key members of the board. "Mason, can we grab coffee?" she asked, her voice wary but inviting. "I'd love to get your thoughts on some ideas I'm considering." His surprised acceptance ignited a flicker of hope in her. With each conversation that followed Muriel, Leslie, even a roundabout chat with Peter from marketing, her conviction solidified. This wasn't only about her, it was about a mutual commitment to elevate the company's values. Engaging them pulled her clarity into sharp focus and warmed her resolve as she listened and weaved their insights into her vision. Later that week, a meeting was scheduled to discuss integration plans of the new initiatives. As she prepared, however, a sinking realization washed over her. The underlying antagonisms hadn't vanished, they merely lay dormant, waiting for the right moment to resurface. Transitioning from words to action would not be seamless. That night, Sarah stared at her reflection in the mirror, mentally preparing for another round of potential confrontation. The risk of failure gnawed at her insides, muffling the excitement she had felt just days prior.
she questioned whether her idealism would sustain as she confronted the realities of challenging established norms. Unbidden, a critical thought emerged: she would face each challenge not just for her own convictions but as an embodiment of hope for those who believed in what could be a corporate ethos steeped in authenticity and respect. As she stepped into the boardroom the following day, the air heavy with expectation, Sarah realized the moment of truth was upon her. Every decision would either fortify her belief or validate her critics. The time had come to face the tangible consequences of her vision. Would she be able to maintain this newfound unity against the undercurrents of dissent lurking nearby? Or would her aspirations collapse under the weight of reality? As Sarah entered the boardroom, she felt an overwhelming sense of purpose surging through her. The gathered senior partners, once intimidating, now appeared like a constellation of possibilities waiting for her to illuminate their common goals. She had risked so much in this journey, and now she stood ready to usher in change not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever doubted their agency within the corporate world. "Thank you all for coming today," Sarah began, her voice steady and confident. "Today, we stand at a crossroads, not just in addressing the discrepancies in our case but redefining who we are as a firm moving forward." Her gaze swept across the table, locking onto their expectant faces. Each individual was an opportunity for collaboration, not just a potential adversary. The atmosphere crackled with tension, excitement, and underlying skepticism. "We have the chance to become leaders not just in our field, but in corporate integrity," she continued, referencing the extensive research they had conducted alongside Marcus and Bella. "The implications of our choices today could echo throughout the industry and beyond." Sarah laid out their findings meticulously, combining data from Marcus's financial investigations with the ethical principles she had come to champion. Each piece conspired to dismantle the veil that cloaked their operations in secrecy. As she spoke passionately, the initial anxiety that had once threatened to engulf her transformed into fervor. Suddenly, she noticed something remarkable happening. Expressions throughout the room began to shift. Once closed postures relaxed, skeptical brows softened, and murmurs of agreement started to bubble beneath the surface. Something was changing, and Sarah was initiating a movement within walls that had long stifled dissent. "Let us not just react," she urged, culminating her presentation. "Let us build a movement, one grounded in transparency and crucial accountability. If we get this right, we redefine our legacy." The fervor in her voice could only be matched by the gleam of possibility igniting in the eyes of some partners. Just as she sensed a turning point, Jonathan attempted to regain control, seeking to exploit any fracture in the burgeoning alliance. "And what of the potential backlash?" he queried, emphasizing the dangers of their proposed course. "You might be setting us up for failure." But this time, Sarah stood firm. "And what of the potential fallout if we turn a blind eye to wrongdoing? The risk of inaction is far greater than confronting our mistakes. We owe it to our clients and ourselves to seek the truth and maintain enduring trust." With reference to shared values, she invited her colleagues to envision the legacy they would leave behind. Emerging solely from financial concerns no longer felt suitable. Instead, she urged for a commitment that resonated deeply with the firm's mission, one that promised leadership and integrity. As murmurs of agreement filled the spaces in the room, Sarah realized they were crossing an unfathomable bridge toward transformation. "The world is changing," Sarah asserted, each word resonating like a rallying cry. "Our firm can be an anchor of ethical practices in a sea of corporate uncertainty. Together, we can set a precedent that brings us not just profits but respect." The anticipation was palpable. One by one, partners began to stand and voice their support, sharing their resolve to confront the issues in tandem, to uphold their commitment to integrity. It became increasingly clear, this was no longer an individual battle. They were ready to embrace the change together. As the meeting concluded, Sarah stepped outside the boardroom with renewed energy. She had achieved something monumental. The arduous struggles of self-doubt had transformed into a solidified sense of purpose. Her relationship with Bella had not only opened her eyes to invaluable perspectives but also allowed her to redefine her career's trajectory. With her hand over her heart, she paused to reflect. Sarah recognized the growth had transformed her professional identity. She was not just Sarah the corporate attorney anymore. She had become Sarah, a leader fortified by compassion and transparency, one who could embrace vulnerability as a strength. The achievement was tangible, the stakes relatable, her vision had been recognized, her efforts validated. It was a profound rebirth in the arena of corporate law. As she stepped into her new role, her confidence resolutely in place, Sarah now understood, true leadership thrives not in isolation but within the vibrant connections forged through mutual respect and a shared pursuit of integrity. In this undeniable moment of success, she realized she was on the precipice of something even greater. The path was arduous, but she was committed to upholding the values that had redefined her, and now, dear friends, it's time for action. You need to subscribe now to the channel. Do not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that inspire and push boundaries. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. The difference you make by doing so is tremendous. Comment below with your reactions and theories about this remarkable ending, and don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Your support fuels this journey of personal overcoming.